Welcome to this week's edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, a special Wednesday edition. It's actually my fault. I had a plane get canceled, and that threw off our schedule. So sorry about that. Usual crew: Mark Culkin, Eric McKinney, me, Chris Arledge, your guest host. Guys, let's just jump right in. Tough last couple days on the recruiting trail, I think you could say. Two five-star defensive linemen, both out of Georgia, have decommitted. There were rumblings about that most of us, including myself, tried to ignore for the last few weeks or months. I was covering my ears and insisting that it couldn't possibly be true. These two guys we could pull out of Georgia. Maybe not. Let's start with that. And then maybe after we cover that, we can talk about the other Georgia kid who's in town. And then we can talk about the upcoming recruiting weekend. So Isaiah Gibson, Justice Terry. So remember a few months ago, guys, where we had that storyline that was really exciting and fun about how USC is about to land one of the great defensive line classes in recent college football history. So about that, Eric, why don't you start us off? Let's talk about Gibson. Let's talk about Terry. Let's talk about what that means for USC's recruiting class, recruiting strategy, and Lincoln Riley's program.
I think it simultaneously means a lot and also kind of not that much. The second part being it never made sense for them to be in the USC class at that point anyway. That was an unofficial visit that they committed off of. Justice Terry flipped from Georgia. These are two Georgia prospects at defensive end that Georgia really, really wanted. That's the program that they go to. That's the program they go to. If it had just been a simple shot and Justice Terry was committed to Georgia, if it had been a simple shot, they committed to Georgia, they stayed there. Nobody would have ever said, "What's USC doing? Why aren't they going and getting those recruits there?" Those were not USC recruits to sign. Now, the hit, and you have to talk about it because you did go out, you did spend time bringing them in, you did do enough to get commitments out of them. That was a long way to go to try to hold on to those guys where you couldn't really prove anything on the field between when you brought them in and now at this point. And when they go back to Georgia and they're here and every single day, what are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you going out there? They're not going to play defense out there. They don't care about that side of the ball. They don't care about, kids down here, whatever it is. You got to stay closer to home. That was always going to be a tough pull. That's one of those things where you want to bring them out, right before signing day and say, "Hey, do you like it here? Stay here." And then you sign them. So it's a hit in terms of you're sitting here and the national narrative is USC can't hold on to defensive recruits, and it's USC all over. I guess Lincoln Riley specifically all over again, not going to play defense, all of that kind of stuff. Again, nothing has happened on the field, and so you don't know whether to pile on or say if they're still good defensively this year, they're going to get some guys. I mean, not to go too deep and cover too many topics, but I'm sure Mark will want to talk to this a little bit too. Hey, maybe you don't have this problem if you wrap up a ton of local guys and more, West region players that no, they're not the number 7. I think Justice Terry was top 30 guy for Isaiah Gibson. They're not those guys, but when you look at it, if you got a bunch of Hayden Lowe's, who's a very good player and seemingly really locked in, and you can touch base with him a whole lot, and he's not getting why are you going across the country stuff every day. Again, I'm going to take the number 1 draft pick. I'm going to take that guy. But at this point, in terms of building the roster and all of that, that feels like you're taking big, big swings to go out there and bring those guys early and hope that you can hang on to them for that long. I don't, I mean, you're now all of a sudden, Drake Stubbs, a guy from Florida, trying to hang on to him all the way across the country, and Florida's going to make a big push there too. So yeah, it's one of those things again, if they had never committed, nobody's batting an eye. Nobody's saying, I can't believe they didn't go get those guys. The fact that that was clearly your plan, let's go make a big splash and get these guys. Yeah, it's a hit that you weren't able to hang on to them.
Mark, what do you have to say about this? I'm sure it's going to be happy.
So look, perception is one man's reality right now, and the optics surrounding USC recruiting, it took a hit. It took a gut punch, and I don't think we should try and soften that and try and put any spinning type of positivity around it. If you're going to go throw haymakers at a Justice Terry and an Isaiah Gibson and try and pull, a Hilton Stubbs from Florida, top 50, top 100 guys in the class, you got to be able to stand there and punch back and make sure you keep those guys locked in. Pressuring guys, if that happened, to commit in March after they've stuffed their bellies and they've experienced some great weather, that's great. But at the same time, you can't be telling the local kids, which Eric was alluding to, that, hey, come to USC, come to the camps, and earn a scholarship, and I'll give you one. Because that right now, that's kind of where USC's at. What people they're questioning, why aren't the local kids wanting to play for USC? Well, a lot of the local kids expect, and I hate using that word, a scholarship offer just because they go to Mater Dei or they go to Bosco or some of the local powerhouse programs. From what I understand, Coach Riley wants you to come in and earn a scholarship. You see players like Jakeem Stewart flying in to do a workout with Coach Henney during the middle of the week. That's the type of thing that I don't know if the coaching staff is focused on, but I'll tell you, when you have a combination within a 24, 36-hour period of you lose Isaiah Gibson, you lose Justice Terry, and then, oh, by the way, we're not going to play Ole Miss either. What kind of message is that sending to guys who like to play physical defensive style of football? Are you sending the right message? Are you sending out good optics?
Yeah, and I think we'll talk about that Ole Miss decision in a bit, but you're right, there probably is some relationship here. We've been talking for weeks or months on this show about how Lincoln Riley's recruiting strategy is a high wire act. He is going after the best of the best around the country, with the hope that he can land elite guys and pull them out of places like Alabama, Georgia, Florida, and Texas. And he will get some, right? I mean, especially in Texas, where USC's had some real success. But geography still matters. And it matters for a whole bunch of reasons. It matters because a lot of these kids, you grow up in Georgia, while Georgia is the elite program in the country, the likelihood that you're going to be a gigantic Georgia football fan and that all of your family and all of your friends are going to be gigantic Georgia football fans is pretty darn high. And if you stay in Georgia, you can do what everybody around you wants you to do. You can play in the uniform that you've been dreaming about playing in, and you can feel pretty comfortable that you're going to, one, be developed, and two, play in national championship games, right? I mean, you get all of that. Whereas if you choose to leave, then you have to deal with, as Eric put it, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And that's hard. Pete Carroll's best class is at USC. You look at his 2003 recruiting class with Reggie Bush and a whole bunch of other guys. They had two guys from out of California. His 2005 class, where you landed, amongst other things, that incredible group of linebackers that was around in 2008, he had four guys from out of California. I don't know that a recruiting strategy that treats California prospects as second class makes sense. Even if you think the California guys aren't as good as the Florida guys or aren't as good as the Georgia guys, I'm not sure it makes sense. Lincoln Riley has taken on a strategy that assumes he's going to be able to bring in these guys and build what he said when he came here, build the best roster in the country. He's not built the best roster in the country yet. He's recruiting like a top 15 program, not a top 5 program. And I'm a little bit concerned that by making the West Coast guys your plan B all the time, you're allowing Oregon to swoop in and dominate West Coast recruiting, which they've done. Dan Lanning has beaten the tar out of Lincoln Riley recruiting the West Coast the last couple of years. He just has. And yes, Lanning has a giant checkbook. Fine. We're also told USC has a competent NIL program this year. But Lanning's coming in and taking these guys. And look, I understand that California may not be the best high school recruiting territory in the country anymore, but it's still 4th or 5th best. I mean, it is. Just look at the numbers. Look at the guys that are ranked highly. Look at NFL draft picks. California is at worst number 4 and probably number 3. So if you clean up in Southern California and you cherry pick guys outside of California who you think are elite and are the right fit, guys who would be interested in being in LA, guys who you think you can pull out of here, then you have a chance to develop a really fantastic roster. If you let Oregon dominate with the California guys and you're chasing after guys in other states, you face a very real possibility you're going to land number 15, number 16 in recruiting again. And by the way, you're not winning national titles if you're recruiting as a number 15 program in the country. You're not. You're just not. It's not going to happen. So, thought experiment for you guys. I want you to imagine in 2007, Nick Saban comes to Alabama. At the time, Alabama is a blue blood, right, without question, but a struggling blue blood. And let's assume that what Nick Saban decides he's going to do is he's going to build a recruiting strategy around pulling the top 5 guys out of Southern California, right? That's the heart of his recruiting strategy. He's going to beat Pete Carroll, who at that time is on the top of the college football world and is as good a recruiter as you will ever find. He's going to beat Pete Carroll for those top 5 guys in SoCal. That's his plan. How do you think that works for him? I mean, look, it may be that Lincoln Riley has some really good plan Bs. It may be that this recruiting weekend goes really well. We'll talk about that in a second. I'm just saying he has set himself up where he is chasing after guys that are extraordinarily difficult to land. And if he doesn't get them, I don't know what happens with the guys who I think have been treated as second-class citizens all along. But I think I know. So I've been talking too long. You guys have any response to that before I go on and rant some more?
Look,
No, I think it's good.
Yeah, if you want to, yeah, I'll just.
No, I mean, Lincoln Riley is recruiting, like when he talks about USC, he talks about 2004, 2005, 2006, like after it got rolling, right? When he talks about what the Coliseum looks like, what USC can be. Again, he's talking about a 3-year window, a 4-year window when it got built up and before it started coming back down. That's not where the program is. The program is not there, and he's recruiting like it's there. He's not recruiting like Pete Carroll's 2000 or 2001 class, 2002 class, that kind of thing, where you have to build up into what it is. And it's interesting. I know that, you know, kind of with social media now and with NIL and transfer portal and all that, there are absolutely shortcuts to get there faster. But the substance that you need and why Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State and those programs are still pulling all these guys in, USC's that they're not coming off that kind of season. The program is not there yet. And so that shortcut, and we'll just go get the best linemen from areas where there are schools that are going to naturally pull those guys in. That's tough. That's tough to do.
Even Pete Carroll at his height wasn't trying to pull 70% of his recruiting class from the South. He wasn't. He would go and get a Joe McKnight, a Brian Cushing from New Jersey, a Keith Rivers, a Patrick Turner, right? These guys were all big time recruits, and he'd pull in some of those guys. He'd pull guys out of Ohio, right? He would do it, but that wasn't the heart of his class. The heart of his class was LA guys, and LA guys at that time badly wanted to play at USC. If he wanted an LA guy, it was about 95% chance he'd get him. Mark, go ahead.
You know, let's also, we're comparing the era when Pete was at USC to the demographics in California right now, and it has changed dramatically. You've got a lot of people in California who want to get out of California. A lot of these families didn't grow up in Southern California. They moved out here, and they've got family members in the other parts of the country. So there's that comfort level to going out of state again, as well as you bring up the programs that are using NIL in a more progressive manner, up front, showing the players from California that go to Oregon, you don't have to wait till you're enrolled. We'll put it in your bank account now. It's a little bit more nuanced. So if Lincoln Riley is trying to do what you want him to do, Chris, and I agree, focus in-house, then go outside the house and go get the Fred Davises and the Patrick Turners and the Keith Rivers, absolutely. But right now, it seems like the program doesn't know how it wants to do things. There's so much transition going on. And it just feels like they're kicking the can, and wherever it is, all right, let's kick it again down the road and see where we end up.
I mean, I think I know what Lincoln Riley wants. He wants to recruit like Lou Holtz at Notre Dame, where he literally recruits nationwide. But even Holtz wasn't able to pull most of those guys out of their hometowns. He pulled enough to have a great roster. Those guys came from everywhere. It's not like South Bend High School has 18 blue chips, right? But that's what he wants to do. But that's extraordinarily difficult to do. Extraordinarily difficult. And so and look, a lot of people will say, well, California doesn't have the talent that it used to have. Fine, I'll concede it. I'll concede that California, this is not John McKay's California. It may not even be Pete Carroll's California. California still sends a lot of guys to the NFL, right? They do. They still send a lot of guys to the NFL. California consistently churns out quarterbacks who are as good or better than anywhere else in the country, skilled players, and there are plenty of solid linemen on the West Coast, not just California, but in the West. A lot of Pacific Islander kids that do well at Utah or Washington or other places, right? You can recruit your home territory and develop a solid roster. It may be that you need to go outside of California to land some elite guys. Pete would do that. Lincoln should do that. I'm just suggesting that if you decide that your recruiting strategy is to pull the top 5 guys out of Georgia, when Georgia is the elite program in college football, that is an extraordinarily high-risk strategy. And I don't know this for sure. I hope I'm wrong. I'm sometimes wrong. I hope this is one of them. I think it's going to blow up in his face. Just like if Nick Saban would have said, I'm going to pull out the top 5 guys from LA, he would not have done it. Not when he first went to Alabama, not when Pete Carroll was on top of the world. It would not have happened, period. So here's the thing, and this is my concern. What Lincoln Riley is trying to sell to recruits right now is a vision of the future, right? I mean, Eric mentioned it. This is not USC right after Leinart, Bush, Lindell, and all the rest of them did their thing. That's not where USC is right now. In fact, maybe we'll talk in a minute about where USC is, but it's not that. And so he's trying to sell them on a vision. What they're being told by everybody else is, look, Lincoln Riley doesn't know what he's doing. He's a good quarterbacks coach. He's going to have a good offense. He's never had a good defense. He's never taken it seriously. USC is about to go into the Big Ten, where they don't have the talent that Oregon's taken over as a West Coast recruiting power. They're not going to be able to compete with Oregon or Ohio State or Michigan or even Penn State in the Big Ten. That's what everybody's telling these kids, right? And Lincoln Riley's trying to sell them on a vision. Now, the 3 of us have every incentive to buy into Lincoln Riley's vision, right? We're USC fans. We want to believe we badly want to believe. I'm having trouble believing right now. And I'm having trouble believing because there's this nagging suspicion that I have. People are gonna roast me for this. I'm saying it anyway. What's the purpose of the internet if not to overreact, right? So I have a nagging suspicion that Lincoln Riley may just not be as good as we thought he was when he showed up. And I'll tell you why I think that. Because one of the things that a head coach has to be able to do is not only coach up a quarterback and put good offenses on the field, but a head coach has to make smart, strategic decisions to put his program in on a sound footing. And Lincoln Riley is making mistakes that Nick Saban and Urban Meyer and Pete Carroll and the other elite coaches, the truly elite guys, did not make. That's what he's doing. I think his recruiting strategy is a mistake. And USC is going to lose out on a bunch of guys that it probably needs, like all those linebackers who are going to go elsewhere, right? That's a problem. It's a problem. It's probably going to happen. It took him years and years longer than the casual fan to figure out that his defensive staff was an absolute disaster. And he wasted a chance at the playoffs his first year because he brought Alex Grinch with him. He should have brought Caleb and left Alex. He brought Alex Grinch with him, and it cost him a playoff berth. He kept Alex Grinch around, and it caused his program to sink from a program that appeared to be on the rise with an absolutely all-star, fantastic, all-timer of a quarterback and an offense that was going to score 40 points a game to a team that scored 40 points a game and still lost 5 games. These are not mistakes that Nick Saban would make. These are not mistakes that Urban Meyer would make. They are not mistakes that Pete Carroll would make. And the truth is, I'm having trouble right now believing that Lincoln Riley knows what he's doing. Sorry. Now, you guys want to correct me? Am I wrong on that? Does he really have things under control, and this is just Arledge overreacting and speaking in the third person?
Perception is one man's reality.
So I think that the defensive hires this offseason were strong decisions. I look, if it goes poorly, I'm okay sitting here right now saying I love what every single person involved and who have talked to those defensive coaches have ever said. And that's NFL guys, that's college guys, that's high school guys, players, coaches, all of it. I think those were strong decisions. Again, you're talking about, did he see that early enough? Clearly not, right? But when he made the decision, those are solid decisions. People aren't buying it from him though, and this is the bed, right, that he's made, that's been offensive focused over and over and over and over and over. And now we're trying to say, no, we're going to play defense. And you've got to sit here in this bed all offseason, even if he and other people are convinced we made the right decisions this offseason, it's going to pay off when we hit the field. This is still that time where you can't do a whole lot about it. And the decisions you've made in the past are why this kind of stuff is happening right now. So maybe at the end of the year, there's going to be a bunch of, I told you so, we were right, we made the right call, we played good defense, we're okay now on that side. But because you took so long to get there, this is what's happening right now.
Maybe that's why they're out there. Well, I shouldn't say they're doing it, but you see these testimonials coming in for Coach Henne, from former players. Last year was DeMarco Farr. Parents, send your kids. It doesn't matter what side of the ball he plays on. He'll help develop you. And you had Jalen Ramsey recently, ironically, telling why you should go to USC because of Coach Henne. But yeah, I don't know. I agree with everything you said, Eric, everything that Chris is saying. Look, with age comes experience, and with experience comes wisdom. And Lincoln Riley is still a young coach. And so if he's going through his growing spurt right now, he's doing it the hard way, that's for sure.
Yeah, and look, maybe so I think here's the problem with what he's trying to sell. I don't think it's hard to sell the defensive staff that he brought in, right? I think everybody recognizes these guys are excellent coaches. And I don't think other programs are telling kids differently. Like they're telling Coach Henne, Fantastic. How long do you think he's going to be at USC? You think he wants to be a defensive line coach at USC for the next 4 years? He'll be gone after 1 year. That's what they're telling him. They're telling him that, Matt Ince, how long do you think he's going to be at USC? He was already a head coach. He's made clear he wants to be a head coach again. He needed some experience in a program where you have to deal with NIL and you have to recruit in that world. He's going to be gone in a year. That's what, Dan Lynn, how long do you think he's going to be here? A year or two? That's what these guys are being told. Now, this is always the case with good assistant coaches, right? I mean, it's rare where you have a program like, maybe Paterno's Penn State or Bowden's Florida State, where you had some elite coordinators in place for many years at a time. That's unusual. Here's the problem. If it's Nick Saban and people tell you, look, that defensive coordinator just hired, guy's fantastic. He's going to be gone in a year. He's going to be a head coach next year. What you can fall back on is, yeah, but Nick will still be there. And if Nick Saban is there, I know you're going to play defense and coach defense, and I know I'm going to get coached up, right? You don't have that with Lincoln Riley yet, because his track record is playing bad defense and frankly ignoring it. He ignored it the last 2 years. He ignored it in a shocking coaching malpractice type way, right? I mean, stunning. We were all stunned. We saw what was going on a weekly basis, said, no way can you put up with that for another year. He did. So the problem is what they're selling is these fantastic assistant coaches. They're great. Everybody knows they're great. I think they'll play much better defense this year than they have over the past few. I don't doubt that. I'm just saying that it's an easier pitch at Georgia to say, what are you going to do when Coach Henney leaves? You come here, you know that we have a foundation of playing good defense. When I lose an assistant, I'll hire another assistant who's just as good. You come here, you don't have to worry about where your position coach is going to land. They might leave. They leave all the time, right? That's a pretty effective sales pitch, I think. So I agree with Eric that the staff is fantastic. I think it will pay dividends this year. But that's a pretty good sales pitch against us, isn't it? By the way, here's the other thing. I really do think that the defensive staff will make a difference. I don't think USC is going to be a top 5 or top 10 defense. I don't think they have that level of talent. I do think they have enough talent with this coaching staff to be a good defense, right? To play well most of the time, to get stops, to look like they're competent out there and give their offense a chance to win the game if the offense scores 38 points, right? I think they're going to be that.
Well, just look at the teams they're playing. What was their offensive production last year? You take LSU off the schedule. Who's the scary offensive opponent on USC's schedule in 2024?
Agreed. Although I would say this, from a fan of the team that lost to Pig Farmer in the Coliseum last year, I would say that it's entirely possible that programs that don't look great on offense can score points on a Lincoln Riley defense. So, but I'm with you. It's not an overwhelming offensive group. But here's the thing. And I'm on a roll now. I'm a little bit upset and I'm a little bit negative, and it's just coming out. And so if people don't like it, they don't like it. If the defense doesn't look good this year, Lincoln Riley's cooked. He's done, because there's nowhere else you can point at that. You can't say, okay, I was slow to replace the coordinator. I need a better staff. There's no better staff. He's not going to get a better staff than this staff. If they don't play well defensively this year, then the perception will be baked in for all time that Lincoln Riley's program, the culture of the program, is not consistent with good defense. That's the pressure that's on these guys this year. Doesn't mean they have to be top 5, but they can't go out and give up 34 points a game, right? They have to be a top 3rd in the Big Ten defense. They have to have some games where they hold people to 13 points. They have to do that. They have to. If they don't, Lincoln Riley's done. Boy, it got negative here in a hurry, didn't it? I don't know. All right, well, let's see if we can, unless you guys want to correct me, and it doesn't sound like you're anxious to jump in and take a different position. Let's do this. Let's talk about let's talk about the recruiting weekend we have coming up. Maybe let's start with the fact that there was another fantastic defensive line prospect from the Deep South who was hanging around this week. I saw he took a picture with Pete Carroll. That's a heck of a start. I think Pete Carroll should be talking to all of our defensive recruits, if at all possible. So let's talk about Yakim and should we get excited about this, guys, or should we just say that's cool? I'm glad he's saying good things about USC. I'm glad he got a chance to meet Pete Carroll. I wish him the best in the SEC. I mean, should we even get excited about this at this point?
Yes, you have to. You have to cling to some hope.
I have to? I don't have an option? I can't just sit here and be grumpy, Mark?
No, you don't get that option right now.
All right, fine. I'm pumped then. Go ahead.
So, and I'm sure Eric will be able to add to this, but Yakim showed up for another unofficial visit, showed up to USC's campus, and he did a private workout with Coach Henning. And from what I was told, got his ass worked. I mean, he put in a hard day's job. And then all of a sudden, a few hours later, he's showing up there at Elite 11 and, all right, this looks good. And it's always been about being in the right spot, right time. I see it. Pete Carroll doing this all over the place. His grandkid is there. Brennan's kid is getting ready to spin the football in high school. Really good prospect, by the way. Lincoln, put him on your radar. But after the end of the first day of 11, I think it might have been Yogi Roth, who brought Pete Carroll and Yakim together. And Pete Carroll went into recruiting mode. And I was, I think, standing maybe 5 feet away. And I was like, all right, I'm ready to sign up. So first thing I think I heard Pete say was, and it was literally his John McKay moment, the best years of my life were coaching at USC. I'm like, all right, it's a good start. Hey, Yakim, you like the weather? And Yakim's, man, I can breathe. I stepped off the airplane and I can feel it. I guess breathing in New Orleans during the summer is really hard. So he touched on the weather. He was talking about how, the network and all the academics and the opportunities that USC can present for you. So yeah, it was a positive sign having him out at USC, even if it was just for 24 hours. Continue developing that relationship. And who knows, maybe in the next few weeks, within the month, you might get the official, hey, I'm reclassifying and I'm committing and I want to play to USC. I don't know. But the fact that, USC had a presence there, and I'm talking about Pete Carroll, yeah, that works. Doesn't hurt, ever.
Yeah, no, look, having Pete around does not hurt ever. I love Pete. It's hard not to. Eric, thoughts on this?
So first, Jakim's he's got to reclassify, right? I mean, we're talking about a 2026 guy, so he can't take an official, but he's been out to USC a lot. The concern, and it was always the concern I had when Dante Williams was recruiting players, is the concern is that you get tied to one assistant coach, right? And now it becomes, I'm going there for that assistant coach more than the school. And so we've talked about what kind of target Eric Henderson is going to be this offseason for everybody, colleges, NFL, whatever. And I'm not throwing in the towel on USC keeping him for a couple of years, because there are some big time defensive line coaches in college out there that like coaching that position, that bring in big time class after big time class. So maybe there's something there for Eric Henderson. I'm not going to just say he's a 1-year guy at USC and gone, or 2-year guy. So that is, but that is one of those concerns. Look, you take the commitment and deal with whatever comes with it after that. But getting him on campus, getting Jakeem Stewart on campus as many times as he has been is absolutely a positive thing, because again, it's not the one unofficial and then trying to make phone calls across the country and, hey, are you still hearing this? Are you still kind of feeling this? He's going to Oregon. No school in the South is going to give up on him. And again, we're still talking about a guy who, as of now, technically still in the 2026 class. Specifically about this weekend, if Elijah Griffin still comes out, he's obviously a big name. I don't know how you can get excited about him when we're just right on the heels of Justice Terry and Isaiah Gibson. I mean, that seems like one of those things where now Georgia starts talking about, hey, why don't we build the best high school defensive line class in the country? And that's easier when all three of those guys are at Georgia. There's another big time lineman, Jared Smith. Again, you're trying to pull an Alabama defensive lineman away from Alabama and some of those schools. The name for me, a couple names, Trajan Odom from North Carolina, from Los Angeles, now North Carolina, trying to pull him back. Again, he's maybe more of an interior guy and someone who's already talked about having interest in coming to Los Angeles, coming back to Los Angeles. Ohio State very much in the mix with him. And then you do have a couple California guys, Treston Castro, a defensive back. He just took a visit to Texas. USC has to kind of shore him back up, I think, just on this trip. He's a USC commit. Marco Jones, for me, is one of those guys. That's a guy that went to Notre Dame, that went to Michigan. Those are the guys. Again, he's a Northern California guy, so not an LA kid, but he's an edge linebacker, probably could play in the middle, getting bigger and bigger every time I see him. It looks like he may be a defensive end down the line, but he's just one of those guys that USC has missed on and that has gone to, I mean, A&M, and there a ton of schools are chasing him. He can play baseball as well, but that's a California guy. When he's showing interest in USC and USC's going after him, grab that guy. Make a big impact on him this weekend. Bring a guy like that into the class and don't line up against him at Michigan or at Notre Dame or at one of those schools. So again, you've got a ton of guys. There's an Auburn commit from Alabama coming in, an offensive lineman. Like there's some big names that are out there, but for me, it's like the guys with the LA connection, the guys with the California connection, build the class there. And then, I mean, we've talked about it so much, right? Then throw your line in deep into Georgia, see if you can get one of those guys. But yeah, it's there's a couple guys coming in where if you can do really well with them, the commitments coming in, Gus Cordova, DeJuan Morris coming in, like shore things up with the guys that are already committed. But with, I think it's 14, 15, 16, something like that. 4 or 5 out of this group plus the commitments. I think that's a solid weekend.
Yeah, and they need a solid weekend right now, right? I mean, they really do. They had 3 big June recruiting weekends. I'm not sure any of them have gone the way they needed to. Now, that may not be true. It may be that some of these guys were really excited and are going to commit later, but I think they wanted guys signing on the dotted line, and we've kind of been moving backwards with that recently. Yeah, Marco Jones is that's a good example of a guy USC has to land. Look, we started maybe last year when we were looking forward to this year's recruiting class. We were talking about how linebacker is a fantastic position in California this year, right? And now you look at it and say, okay, are they going to get any of those guys? I mean, there's a very real possibility. A kid like Faraimo, who I'm not sure that they've been recruiting as hard as some other programs have. That's the sort of guy that if you lose comes back to hurt you later. I think. And maybe I'm wrong. I'm not. Look, the USC defensive staff is better able to project than I am. Kid looks like a player. He looks like somebody USC should wrap up. He looks like the sort of guy, if he goes somewhere else, we're going to regret it for 3 or 4 years. And, they had the other kid, Noah, here last weekend. That's the sort of kid that if you lose him to Oregon, and in recent years, it's the kind of kid you lose to Oregon, that's absolutely going to kill you for the next 3 years. It just is. So we'll see what happens. I don't want to keep talking about this because at this point, I'm just beating the dead horse. But
well, because you're talking about Faraimo, right? If it's Notre Dame, then you're tacking him on Kingston last year, and now you're right now. What happens in 26, 27? Like you let that thing get rolling. It's tough to stop.
Goes back to my point. Why are kids from California so willing to leave the state? And it's not just because USC isn't going after them.
Well,
Why
I
are they
think there.
not
I mean, I
doing
think
it?
there are a few reasons, right, Mark? I mean, part of it is that it's harder to recruit when your program hasn't been elite. Remember when Lorenzo Booker was trying to figure out where to go, and USC wanted to be in it, Notre Dame was in it, Florida State was in it. I know I'm going back a long time. This was Reggie Bush a year or two before Reggie Bush, but at the time, USC's program had been struggling, and a team like Florida State could walk into Southern California and pull the elite guys out. When Georgia was struggling, and there have been plenty of times when Georgia football was struggling, you could walk into Georgia and pull guys out. It's harder to do that when your program's playing at an elite level. It's very difficult to do that now. I think that's the fundamental problem. If USC had a generation of high school kids and watched USC playing in national title games for the last 10 years, they would not be leaving.
Notre Dame's not playing at an elite level. They're not playing in national championship games. They haven't won a bowl game in 30 years. So I guess I'm just specific.
I think that's a slight exaggeration, although I do like the shot at the Irish. I think they have won a bowl game at some point, right? But here's
I forget to throw the word major bowl game into there.
Hey, look, Notre Dame does not recruit at a top 5 level either, generally speaking.
They are right now.
Well, we'll see. We'll see where they finish. But generally speaking, they do not recruit top 5 classes at Notre Dame. And that's probably why Brian Kelly's at LSU, where you can recruit top 5 classes. So USC can recruit top 5 classes, but if you want the kids in California to stay in California, you have to put a great product on the field so that they grow up rooting for USC and watching USC win. It's harder to keep kids at home when you're not winning. It used to be that pulling a kid out of Florida away from Miami or Florida State, or Florida for that matter, when those three programs were elite, pulling a kid out of Florida was extraordinarily difficult. It's not as hard right now. I mean, Miami pays good money, but those programs aren't what they used to be.
Well, maybe we should just start looking at this from strictly from a business aspect. Next year, schools are paying kids directly. That means everybody's getting taxed on an income one way or another. Living in California versus Oregon or Indiana or Florida or Texas, where you have no state taxes, that's going to be a huge draw. Kids are being sold on playing football at a professional level in college. And I think we need to look at it from a more nuanced perspective, more than, well, USC needs to recruit a certain way. There's a lot going on behind the scenes that's changing the way kids are looking at schools.
That's all fair, but I will say this: it doesn't matter if you grow up as a Georgia football diehard, it's going to be hard to say no to Georgia, right? I mean, if I had been an elite high school recruit during the days of Pete Carroll, the likelihood that anybody could get me to go anywhere other than USC would have been zero. It's the place I always wanted to go. I lived and died with every game. There's no way in the world I would have turned down USC to go to Oklahoma or Notre Dame. But if it's during the Paul Hackett years, I might have had to consider it, right? I mean, so the truth is, USC's having trouble holding on to their guys for a lot of reasons. You're right about that, including Oregon's checkbook. But let's not forget, USC chose to tolerate a ridiculous head coach and a crappy football program for a number of years while these kids were growing up in their late elementary years up through the present. That's a major factor. And it's a major factor that Lincoln Riley is, I think, making a lot of these California kids his plan B. And if you are a 4-star recruit who dreams of playing in the NFL and you have a bunch of other programs coming to you telling you, hey, you're my number 1 guy, you're a superstar, you're going to be an All-American, and your plan B for Lincoln Riley, that's a problem. That's a problem. And I don't know that you overcome that easily.
Lincoln was right. When he got here, there were too many California players on the team that weren't good enough to play at USC. That's absolutely true. There was a large gap of time where USC took California recruits who made their name as freshmen or sophomores and never got any better and hung on to that 4-star ranking because it's hard for recruiting sites to pull that away when they've developed relationships with those guys. He's not wrong about that. There's some baby with the bathwater kind of thing where you can't, it's not all of them. There's absolutely California guys who make a name early and then can play or develop late, and those are the guys that you want, that you see go to other programs, and all of a sudden a few years down the road it's like, wait, why didn't USC look at this guy? So there's got to be a balance right there. At the end of the day, I know there's a ton of stuff that goes into recruiting. You've got, I mean, that you can see a kid can decommit and you have no idea what he was actually asking for. And it's like, yeah, we could meet some of that stuff, but man, we're not going to do this other stuff. But the school gets bashed for, you didn't hang on to that kid, whatever it is. Win games, produce NFL players, be somewhere in the same ballpark vicinity of other schools with NIL, and you'll get them. That's it. They still want to win games. They still want to go to the NFL. I get that, like, the upfront money is going to get some guys. If that's all it is, you don't want that guy on your roster anyway. And I absolutely believe that, because he's not, football's still that team game, right? If you're a guy who's going to only go there for that, you're going to leave before you make an impact anyway. So it still comes down to that. Win games, put a good product on the field, get guys excited about playing football for your program.
All right. Mark mentioned it a little bit earlier. USC, I think it's USC, has decided to opt out of the Ole Miss home and home. What do we think about this? Substantively and maybe in terms of perception. What do we think? Mark, you brought it up earlier, so I'll let you weigh in first.
I think it's terrible. I think it's horrible. Look, we're watching college football erode in front of our eyes as it is. I mean, it is changing every single day by the minute. And, I used to love the whole mantra of anyone, any place, anytime. It worked when USC was winning the big games. It worked when they were playing in the Pac-12. And that's why I strongly feel that it was USC that asked out of the series. The other day, USC was, they signed their contract. They're back with ESPN local radio. And they're going to be covering USC football, men's and women's basketball. So they had all the coaches coming on throughout the day. And they were talking to Lincoln Riley about the upcoming season, and, USC's moving to the big conference and how challenging the schedule can be. And you're opening up the season with LSU. And then Lincoln Riley kind of took it from there. It's like, yeah, it is going to be a daunting schedule, and we're scouting and yada, yada, yada. But I need to remind people, when these schedules are made years and years in advance, USC was playing in the Pac-12, so maybe we needed these types of games. And instantly, it's like, all right, red flag alert. LSU wasn't asking out of the game. Ole Miss wasn't asking out of the game. I'm hearing Lincoln Riley say, our schedule's too tough now that we're in the big conference. We don't want to play LSU. We don't want to play Ole Miss. To me, that's I don't like that. What separates college football from the NFL are the traditions, are the rivalries, of going and playing teams that you typically don't play. And the way the game is moving anyways, who cares how tough the schedule is? Isn't that the moral high ground that Trojans always stood on? We'll play anyone, any place, anytime. Now, all of a sudden, no, we'll take the path of least resistance. Well, you're going to be going into a harder conference, allegedly. You're going to be playing a 12-team playoff system, and then it's moving to a 14-team playoff system. Now you're going to be paying players. Eventually, you're going to have, we've talked about this on the show, there's not going to be any more conferences. You're going to have a pool of 68 teams. You'll have a commissioner. Here's what we're scheduling everybody out of. So what's the narrative going to be then? It's too tough? I'm tired of people looking for excuses of why USC shouldn't do something. If all things were equal, Notre Dame wouldn't only have 3 road games. I don't compare USC to everybody else. Compare USC to USC. Stop trying to be the sheep. Be the leader.
So, Eric, respond to that and tell me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like Mark.
Yeah, obviously, yes.
He wants to occupy the moral high ground with an 8-4 record by scheduling teams that no other major program would schedule. Right?
Ole Miss didn't want to play that game either. Their AD came out, I mean, a week ago, and Lane Kiffin said yesterday that he's known this game has been off for a long time. They don't want it. Look, Ole Miss plays the Citadel next year. They're not trying to get out of that game to do it. So the Ole Miss AD said, yeah, we expect to go to 9 conference games, which again, that's you talk about kind of high ground and all that kind of stuff. The SEC should have been playing 9 conference games forever, right? Well, all these other conferences have been. So there's part of that. I do absolutely think that yes, USC is not, oh no, we really want to play this game. We want to play that game. They play Notre Dame every year. As far as I'm concerned, I think that USC believes that's good enough. With the Big Ten schedule plus Notre Dame, we can have 2 other games, right? Not against Power 4 teams. And I think that that's okay to have 2. So I don't really mind getting out of that just from that standpoint. Once it's on the schedule and you're saying we're going to go play these games, again, I wouldn't have minded had they played that schedule and those are the teams you're going to play. So I think it's everybody's decision. I think that with the way college football is going, you're just going to see more of that, right? I don't think it's going to completely eliminate the big non-conference games. I think it will eliminate one team playing 2 or 3 of those every year, right? The USC LSU game, I think, is good for college football. I think leading off the season with those games all over the country are great. And playing one of those games is positive for college football. Playing Notre Dame and what potentially is a really good Ole Miss team, I don't think you need to do that with the Big Ten schedule. So no, I don't want USC to play 2 FCS teams and UNLV every year. No. But because you've got Notre Dame, because you've got that kind of special situation with them, I don't mind if you don't have another Power 4 team, because you're going to get a year where it's Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, all of them kind of lined up on your schedule down the line.
So if this was Ole Miss circa 2004, 2005, or whenever they weren't considered a good team, we'd be okay with this? Because now the suggestion is, well, Mark, you've been pounding your fist. You want Cal and Stanford on the schedule, so we're going to trade an SEC team for an ACC team? I'm just trying to understand, where is the line in the sand? What is
the line is, I'll tell you what the line is. The line is you don't schedule 2 losses non-conference. That's the line.
Okay, now we're guaranteed losses now.
Well, they're not guaranteed losses, but they are games you can lose. And here's the thing. Alabama will usually play 1 good team and 3 absolute clowns in their non-conference schedule. Most of the SEC teams play 4 absolute nobodies in their non-conference schedule, because they realize that that you are scheduling yourself into the top 10. I'm going to miss the days when USC scheduled the teams that USC has traditionally scheduled, right? I mean, we've seen USC play Oklahoma, Ohio State, Auburn, Arkansas. I mean, now LSU. We have seen over the years that USC has pretty consistently tried to play really good non-conference schedules, in part because USC has trouble getting fans to the stadium that they play in San Jose State, if we're being honest. And Nebraska doesn't have to do that. Well, Nebraska is another team we played. Nebraska doesn't have to do that as much because they sell out no matter what. USC does not sell out for bad opponents. But I'm going to miss those days. But so long as college football, as long as success in college football is based solely on the second number in your record, then I'm not sure that it makes sense to continue to do that. Nobody else is doing it, and I don't think USC can afford to do it at this point. If they wanted to change the rules to encourage teams to do it, look, you could make it. You could make it where your non-conference games actually impact your conference standing. That'd be weird, right? But you could do it. You could make it where if you play in LSU, that's worth one conference win. Whereas if you play Mercer, whether you win or lose, it's worth 0. I mean, you could tweak the rules in some way to encourage people. You could make it where you're not allowed to play anybody outside of the Power 4, right? You could do that. Nobody has an appetite for any of that, because if you're a coach, why in the world would you want that? If you're the coach, you want to have UNLV and San Jose State as your first 2 games, because opening games are scary, man. You never know what you're going to get in an opening game. You'd rather have it against an opponent where even if you tank, you're still going to win by 3 touchdowns. So coaches don't want that. So look, I'm with you, Mark. I hate that this is the direction that USC is going to go. I don't really think they have a choice. I think it's suicide right now to be playing LSU and Notre Dame and a Big Ten schedule, especially when you have a top 15, top 20 roster, but not a top 3 roster. It's just, it doesn't make sense. As much as I'm looking forward to that LSU game, it doesn't make sense.
I look at it from a different angle. I said, you know what? Let's say you beat LSU and you beat Ole Miss. That allows you a little bit of latitude to lose a conference game because you've stepped up. You've taken
maybe. I think you need the
selection
selection committee to prove it, right? I think you need them to prove that they're going to do that, because they will right? There's a chance that they hammer you for that. And a team beating Mercer in week 11 gets to skate, right? They're not punished for getting that kind of breather there. So again, if they prove, hey, this team lost 3 games, but boy, they played a tough schedule, we're going to put them in at 11 or 12 or whatever it is and get them in there, then it's a different conversation. I have no faith, no trust that they're going to do that. I think they're going to go 0 loss, 1 loss, 2 loss, top teams go in.
They will compare 1-loss teams based on schedule, but they do not have 2-loss teams jump 1-loss teams. The pollsters have never done it. The selection committee doesn't do it. I mean, they don't. So
it's about perception though. It's about perception though. We keep coming back to this. Why is the big conference considered a better conference than the former Pac-12? USC, the year in 2008, when they lost 1 game to Oregon State, what was the perception? Florida and Oklahoma were still better than them.
Yeah.
Even though they had the best defense in the country, even though Florida lost on the same weekend as USC lost to Oregon State.
That's all true, but USC doesn't have to worry about that now. What they do have to worry about is if you schedule LSU instead of UNLV, and that means that you go 9-3 instead of 10-2, you get left out. And I'll tell you right now, the selection committee is not going to say, we're going to put USC ahead of these other 10-2 teams because, you know, USC really went out and played a tough schedule. The selection committee hasn't done that. The pollsters haven't done that. You're asking people to look at these things in a way that nobody in college football has looked at them before. And I don't trust them to do it.
These power conferences are being set up, and they're called power conferences for a reason. Look at the way they're set up right now.
If you play 3 lousy non-conference teams and finish second in the Big Ten, you're in the playoff. That's the reality. If you lose 2 non-conference games and finish second in the Big Ten, you're probably not. That's the simple math USC is looking at, and I get it. I don't like it any more than you do. I'm actually not interested in seeing USC play San Jose State. I don't enjoy it. I'm pumped to see USC play LSU.
No, it should be, right? Someone should take over scheduling for all the Power 4 conferences, or Power 2 when we get there. And those are the teams you play. And yeah, there's a 4-loss team in the playoff because you played all the best teams that are lined up. And yeah, right, you're going to play Purdue, you're going to play Rutgers, you're going to play, some Wake Forest, whatever it is. But you've got some entity that is making sure, like, we're not playing Citadel in week 11 like some of these programs are going to do, and then try to hold their schedule up against teams that play really great non-conference games. So yes, when everybody gets there, I would love that. I would love 3 great games for every team non-conference, and then you start to figure out who those guys are. But at this point, if you're USC, you've got a responsibility, I think, to the program and players to try to set them up best to get into the playoff.
Let's ask I would love to be able to poll the players. I would love to get their opinion on this.
Oh, I'm sure the players want to play big games.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't look, once a selection committee decides it's going to punish SEC teams for playing 4 absolute joke non-conference games, once the selection committee does that, then we're going to have a conversation. Until they're willing to do that, the USC's athletic director has to look at it and say, this is insane for us to do this. Georgia can get away with playing nobody in non-conference if they want to. And then they'll play 3 or 4 decent teams in conference. If they split them, they're 10-2, they're in the playoff. And here we are scheduling 2 50-50 games. If we lose one of them, we're already behind the 8 ball. Look, I get why they're doing it. I don't like it. It's the smart play. All right. We've yelled a little bit. We've yelled at Lincoln Riley. We've turned this into quite an episode. I'm sure we'll have plenty of comments about how none of us know what we're talking about, which is probably true. So let's prove that we don't know what we're talking about. Let's play Arledge's 10 questions. McKinney's on a 2-game winning streak right now, and there are lots of people that are saying that I have my thumb on the scale to help him. That's not true. It's not true. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. All right, guys, score is 0-0. Let's start off. Question number 1. Mark, since you're the underdog and on a 2-game losing streak, you start us off. Give me the best speech in a football movie.
Perfect segue, since I'm the underdog. From the soles of your feet, with every ounce of blood you have in your body, lay it on the line until the final whistle blows. And if you do that, we cannot lose. We may be behind on the scoreboard at the end of the game, but if you play like that, we cannot be defeated. We are Marshall.
I like it. Eric, are you just going to give me a movie title, or are you going to actually deliver a speech?
I'm not going to deliver a speech. I'll give you a little bit of it. We're in hell right now, boys. And this is middle fastball, right? Al Pacino, Tony Mato from Any Given Sunday. And it's cheating a little bit because you're picking Al Pacino, right? Like of all the people who delivered speeches, Denzel Washington's in there a little bit too, but yeah, I'll go with Al Pacino kind of giving any speech. Just a hair over. Remember when Bobby Boucher came back and the Mud Dogs won the Bourbon Bowl? That one was up there for me also.
Yeah, well, here's the problem though. When you pick an Al Pacino speech, that's why you're not able to give the speech, because if people remember the original and they see what you do, Mark gave the speech. It was a fantastic performance. And so based on his thespian skills alone, he gets the point. 1-0. What's that?
Joke, never mind.
Question number 2. Who replaces Ole Miss on USC's schedule? Eric.
So, I looked at like a UNLV, a San Jose State, that kind of thing. It's late notice, and I think those guys are full. I'm gonna go way back. I'm gonna say we bring back the Alliance Athletic Club. That was USC's first ever football game, and that's who they should bring back out for this one.
That would be an exciting atmosphere. Mark, you good with Alliance? Whoever that is.
I think I'm gonna go with my it's time to put Cal and Stanford back on the schedule, since ACC is softer than the SEC.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Actually, what I'd like to see is USC schedule Alabama and then publicly say the reason they dropped Ole Miss is because they wanted a good program. I would like to see that just to tweak Lane Kiffin, but in any event, Eric McKinney with the creative and ridiculous answer gets the point, because I am into creative and ridiculous. Question number 3. Was the Dillon Panthers offense better with Tim Riggins at running back and Smash Williams on the bench? Mark Culkin.
Probably you need to have Smash on the field. You need to have guys with an edge that play with them.
Tim Riggins didn't have an edge?
I like Smash. Better name too.
He did have a great name. What do you think, McKinney? Do you even know what we're talking about? Have you even watched the show?
So my whole strategy here is to give you an answer that does not result in a 2-point swing of me losing a point and Mark getting a point. So it feels like no, I've not watched a minute of that show. I watched the movie. Uh, it feels like you want me to say yes, which then makes me want to say no. I'm gonna go with yes. I'm gonna go with yes. It feels like that might be setting you up to give a reason why that's correct.
I mean, I like the physicality when they had Riggins at running back, but you do like the explosiveness from Smash. And because Eric has no idea what he's talking about, the point is going to go to Mark Culkin. It's 2-1. Question number 4. USC is throwing a fade near the goal line for the win. And I know most of you are thinking we should be handing the ball off. We should be handing the ball off there, but not. We're throwing the fade. You can pick any USC wide receiver, past or present, to be the recipient of that pass attempt. Who is it? Eric, go.
So if you ask me to pick a USC wide receiver to do anything than like maybe win a limbo contest, I'm going Mike Williams. Mike Williams is the answer. And I had that at pick a USC wide receiver, ...
Fair. Mark.
Yeah, I'm going specific play. You said a fade. I need someone with really long arms. Somebody who has got that basketball skill to him. Give me Dwayne Jarrett. I've seen him do it enough times.
So you got Dwayne Jarrett, you've got Mike Williams. Those are two obvious candidates. I think Keyshawn, who also is a tall receiver, that's your 3, right? That's your 3. Is there anybody else that can even be considered here?
I think you got Jacoby Lane getting in the barn.
Well, 2 years from now, I hope we're including Jacoby in this talk. Right now, if you say Jacoby over those 3 guys, you lose a point. Okay.
I'd let Marquise Lee with that athleticism try to do something. Again, not a tall guy, but maybe Juju's in there too. If he can stiff arm early and then go up and get it.
That's fair. Drake London has to be in the mix on this, right? I mean, Michael Pittman, not Michael Pittman. Michael Pittman. What was his dad's name? Was his dad's name also Michael?
Yes.
Is he a junior? Okay. I mean, Pittman's also up there in terms of guys who would go up and get the ball at the high point.
We went too far past Mike Williams, though.
Yeah, no, I like both answers, and there are all kinds of candidates, but Eric knows me, and he knows that if you throw Mike Williams out there, that you get a point, and he does. It's 2-2. Question number 5.
Mark's best counter answer would have been Pete Carroll.
Mark, don't do it. Don't sabotage yourself. I see that look in your face. You're going to sabotage your game. Listen, this is perfect for you, Mark. You're a classic rock connoisseur, I think. So give me the best Vietnam protest song.
War. What is it good for? Edwin Starr.
Yeah. All right. That's a good one. Eric?
Yeah, that was my number. I was ready to pivot to that one if Mark gave mine. Again, fastball, middle with Fortunate Son.
Yeah, that's the answer. And Mark's answer is a good answer. I just prefer Credence. So we're going 3-2. Congratulations, Eric. Biggest what if in USC football history, and you cannot use anything from the Texas Rose Bowl. McKinney, what is it?
So in the 2 answer, right? The easy one is like John McKay ends up as a tennis coach or whatever, or something like that. But I'm going to go a little bit more realistic. What if USC hired competent athletic directors over the last 20 years, right? I think Jen Cohen is putting things back together and is going in a good direction. But that's a big chunk of time at a time where college football is undergoing gigantic fundamental changes to have, I think it ends up with, looking back, 3 in a row, athletic directors that were just not qualified at all, or certainly at that time, to do that. And Mike Bowen had a big help from Brandon Sosna, but in the way out, and now when you hear kind of his involvement in different things, especially NIL related stuff, that is a big gap in terms of solid look ahead, forward-looking leadership at an important position at what should be an important place.
Okay, good answer. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, no, I was ready to kind of use the what if, Brandon Sauceman has stuck around, because I think he was, the guy behind propping up Mike Bowen. Now, since that's not my answer, what if USC and Notre Dame never played way back when? What happens to USC's football program?
Yeah, interesting question. I don't know if you guys saw the movie. There was a movie Yesterdays where the Beatles didn't exist because of some strange thing. Mark's answer kind of gives me the same vibe. Like, what if that didn't exist in the world? It's such a substantial part of my life that that it actually makes me a little sad to think about it. Mark Holcomb gets the answer. 3-3. USC commit you were most excited about. I'm talking about in your lifetimes. The guy, when USC landed him, you said, yes, that's the guy we had to have. Mark.
Just because there was so much going on behind the scenes and so much buildup, Joe McKnight.
Eric?
Same spot for me. It was Reggie Bush, right? San Diego kid, went to high school near me, watched him a lot in high school, and that's when kind of first started getting into recruiting and that sort of thing.
Yeah. My answer was the same as Mark's in that, and Joe McKnight turned out to be a really good football player. He had impossible expectations, right? Because he was supposed to be the next Reggie, and there probably isn't a next Reggie, but I remember pulling him out of Louisiana, especially because you sort of had that USC LSU rivalry, though because we hadn't met on the field, but there was that disputed national championship. Reggie's gone, McKnight comes in. I remember thinking that was just an enormous recruiting coup. And as excited as it was for Reggie, I wasn't surprised because Reggie was a San Diego kid. Mark Holcomb gets a point. He's up 4-3. Notre Dame only plays 3 true road games next year. Respond. Eric?
Yeah, I'm going to say 2. I'm not going to count at Purdue as a road game for Notre Dame. So
Fair.
I've got 2. That's embarrassing. I've also got, I can't talk out of both sides of my mouth, right? If you want to make the playoff, you have a responsibility to set up your schedule as favorable as possible for your coach and your players. I can appreciate the fact that is set up for them. I hope it gets talked about if we're kind of splitting hairs at the end of that.
Mark?
4 words. Join the big conference already. 5 words, excuse me. Look, if we're going to talk about, scheduling easy to get to the playoffs, this is what happens. This is when you're allowed to make your own schedules. People take advantage of it.
What's most disappointing to me about it is that Notre Dame has historically been one of those programs that actually does try to schedule big games against big opponents. And so to see that nonsense where they play 3 neutral site games so they don't actually have to play road games is just shameful. Shame on you, Irish. You're an embarrassment to college football now. I'm dropping you from the ranks of the Blue Bloods. You're no longer there. I always had you in the top 3, but now I'm going to drop you right below Texas. You're now number 7. Okay. Both of you get a point. Both answers were fine, but just fine. All right. Les Miles is suing LSU for vacating wins because those vacated wins means he's now ineligible for the College Football Hall of Fame, which is very sad, I'm sure. Now, here's the question. Who do you feel most sorry for when it comes to their Hall of Fame situation? Barry Bonds, Les Miles, or Pete Rose? Mark?
Pete Rose. I get it. He gambled on baseball. Didn't gamble on his own team. Not to lose.
I think not at all, right? I don't think he gambled on the Reds. I don't know.
As far as I know, he never bet on the Reds to lose. So I'm covering all my bases right there.
All right. McKinney, who do you feel most sorry for?
I feel most sorry now for Les Miles for shining a gigantic spotlight on himself with this conversation in a situation where he has no business getting talked about as being a Hall of Fame head coach. And now everyone gets to talk about that. And I feel bad that he did this to himself. Are we, I mean, is this can't be real. He can't truly think that he belongs. I mean, no undefeated seasons. He finished at Kansas like with absolute garbage. Oklahoma State was fine, but not great. LSU, he didn't really like run off a ton of, national championship type seasons in a row. That can't be real. No,
Why do I feel bad for him?
I didn't.
Why
I feel bad that he's going to get embarrassed about this now.
Oh,
I think
no,
it was-
no, he deserves it now.
I think it was ESPN, not The Onion, so I think it's real. Yeah, look, that's kind of why I set the question up the way I did, because with Barry Bonds and Pete Rose, you have two guys who aren't in the Hall of Fame, but are clearly belonging there based on their on-field performance. Les Miles, I don't even know what Les is talking about. I mean, the idea that Les Miles is one of the all-time great football coaches is just silly. I liked Eric's tirade. He gets the point. It's 5-5 going into our final question. This is going to decide everything. This question is from a loyal viewer, Phil Parker, who a few days ago asked me this question. It's a ridiculous question, which makes it perfect to close out this show. Here it is. What is the true spirit animal for each of the three of us? McKinney, you go first.
I'm mostly interested if this is Iowa defensive coordinator Phil Parker, and this is what he's getting from our show, which is very exciting for me.
I can assure you it's not.
Okay.
I can assure you it's not. But if Phil Parker is watching our show, then it's nice to have him here. Go ahead. Spirit animals.
All right. So this was hard, and I'll admit it's hard because I didn't spend a ton of time like thinking about this, and so it's gonna be a little off the cuff. All right, so we'll start with Mark. Mark is a mule. Mark's a mule, right? At first glance, right? Mules, ornery, bad-tempered, stubborn, all of that. When you get to know him, right? Soft side, nice guy. That's it. Chris, I'm gonna go.
Mark maybe those things on second glance too. I don't know. All right.
That's why I listed three things. There was a third glance in there too, right? So Chris, I'm gonna go Chris Dragon for Chris. And it has, look, I'm not gonna lie. It has a lot to do with the large pile of gold and or points that he sits on and tries not to give out as much as possible. And then for me, obviously, it's a few different ones, but you end up with the majestic white horse, Andalusian, Arabian, whatever the thing might be.
You're traveling.
Galloping around the Colosseum, yes.
So I'm a dragon, clearly trying to curry favor with me. I appreciate that. He's traveler, and Mark is a mule. Mark, what are yours?
So Francis checking in here. Actually, what I read the question differently, that we were only supposed to come up with our own spirit animal. So now that I have to come up with a spirit animal for both of you, I'll start there. Eric, I'm going to be a little bit nicer. You remember everything. You're an elephant. Chris, I'm going to let Greg Katz's label stick. You're the viper. You're a snake. A good kind. Kind that strikes. Not the bad kind.
It's funny. Viper and snake have very different connotations, right? When you said viper, I thought, yeah, I feel good about that. Then you said you're a snake, and I thought, oh, wait a minute.
Oh, they're part of the snake family. I mean,
hell, he said I was a dragon. All right, what's yours?
So the research I did checked off all these little boxes in my personality. I'm not a jackass. I'm a wolf.
Here's what I love about that. I love that you started that part of your answer with the research that I did. As if there's some sort of empirical data you can sift through in
I
order
went
to
to People
figure.
magazine and they had a personality quiz that I took.
Okay. One man Wolfpack. Is that what you are, Mark?
Describes
From
the power of the
from the
wolf.
angle.
It brings forth instinct, intelligence, appetite for freedom, sounds like me, and awareness of the importance of social connections. When the wolf shows up in your life, pay attention to what your intuition is telling you. That's me.
That's you. Yeah, you nailed it. Okay, listen, here's the thing. I liked both answers. I really did. But I'm going to give this point to the person who actually read the question, which actually said for each of the three of us. Mark didn't read the question. I know I'm going to get accused of trying to attack Mark. I am not. I think Mark is a wolf. I believe that strongly, deep down in my soul. And that's the animal I would have picked. But look, sometimes wolves aren't great with reading comprehension, and this is one
I
of
think
those
you should let
times.
Phil clarify his question because there's some ambiguity there, that last part of it. What is the true spirit animal for each of the three of us?
Well, it can't.
Asking each of us to give our own spirit animal.
Well, that would make sense if all three of us answered all these questions, but I don't, and therefore, because I'm not a participant, that can't possibly be the meaning.
We'll see.
You're a wolf. You're a wolf. You don't need this. You don't need this game. Wolves don't need wins in this game. They don't.
This is why Phil Parker is so good. The offense is just absolutely confused by everything he throws out there. Iowa does not give up points. This you're seeing why.
That's right. That's right. Okay. McKinney, 6-5. You're the winner today. Congratulations. 3-game winning streak. I feel good about Mark next week. I don't want to have longer than a 3-game winning streak. So, McKinney, I'll be honest, unless you are lights out next week, you're probably going to have a rough go of it. Guys, do you have anything to share with the people before we sign off?
Yeah, I'm pre-decommitting from next week's show.
Yeah. Don't.
All right. Well, we'll talk a lot of recruiting again next week. Hopefully we have good news, even if it's just temporary good news. All right. I guess that's it. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you next week. Until then, fight on, everybody.